Welcome to the Dr. Nikki Starr Show, a podcast to support you in your spiritual awakening and personal development. As a spiritual teacher, healer, and intuitive coach, my intention is to empower you to live your ultimate potential and your ultimate life. As a former medical doctor and mystic, my role is to bridge the gap between science and spirituality to support you in understanding more of your multidimensional aspects. I share on a diverse range of topics, and it's all to support your greatest becoming. My mission is to continue reaching millions of people for the healing and awakening of humankind for the creation of the new earth. Thank you for being here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Dr. Nikki Starr Show. Today, I have with me Nathan, who's also a Reverend. And we've been following each other for some time, and we're in a similar community of coaches and healers. And when I was thinking about who I wanted on and what topics I wanted on this season of the podcast around healing the man-woman relationship, I really felt it was important for us to discuss the narcissist empath dynamic that gets a lot of attention on social media and that kind of pits men and women against each other. And I think there's a lot of compassion to be had and also a lot of self-responsibility to have to end these type of toxic dynamics. And Nathan, I saw that you on your page share I was a narcissist, and I would really love to hear your journey. I know that I also saw that you were in gangs, and I think you were dealing drugs too.
Yeah,
and
I was.
and you're a reverend and engaged. And so your whole journey, obviously, to go from where you were in a challenging place and kind of, obviously that's coming from a place of trauma and healed trauma, probably, and then to now come to help others on their journey as well. So thank you for being here, and I'd love for you to introduce yourself as well.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm excited for this chat. So my name is Reverend Nathan Thomas Kohlerman, transpersonal therapist and multidisciplinary visionary in a lot of ways, devoted father to 4, bestselling author, speaker. And, my main message is to teach people how to turn their darkness into their art and how to become the architects of their destiny, right? Because we are humans, we are imperfect, we all have journeys, and the despair, the sorrows, the valleys, the trenches, that's where the magic lives. That's where, for me, I've felt the most safe. And, in relation to this work, my journey has been a transgression and evolution, whatever word you want to use, for a very transformative path. And it hasn't been easy at all. I don't think anybody's path is really easy unless they sit around and do nothing all the time, which is unfortunate. So, coming from a place of darkness and chaos and, for the sake of conversation, looking at my parents' dynamic growing up and seeing this play out in a big way, seeing the explosions, seeing the fights, seeing the abuse, seeing the avoidance, seeing the attachment style show up in real form, in real time, but not having the language or the ability to label or identify it. I've always just seen that as, oh, this is what relationships are. This is how they're supposed to be. And I took that, and ran with it. I had my first girlfriend at 14, and, those high school relationships really aren't quality, but they do expose and they set the pace or set the tone for years and years to come. Because I think that's the thing that most people often overlook, right? Everybody talks about childhood trauma and what it was like, to grow up with mom and dad, but we don't really necessarily factor in the effect or the impact of these little seeds of relationship that are sown over years and years and years that translate into the adulthood, into the lessons. And then we're carrying relationship to relationship to relationship to lesson to lesson to lesson. And it becomes so compounded and convoluted in a way where we start to ask the question, well, why do all my relationships look the same? And eventually it came to a point, whether it was me getting married at 19 in Korea, to having my child at 20, to coming back from deployment, going through a divorce, separating from my daughter, and then going into another relationship with my older son's mother in an illegal relationship in the military, coming out of that, and then shortly relocating back home. Then again, another relationship falling apart, another child separated from his father. Those are things that I'm currently still repairing, still working on. And it was the loss of those relationships, and more so the separation from my two children, that had me in that moment of despair and really having to ask, like, who am I and why am I not the father I wanted to be? And it exposed a lot. So over the last 12 years in my journey of fatherhood, it's been this constant effort, right, to try to be better, not just for myself, but for my children, not just for my relationships, but my community, because we see that these dynamics are playing out not in just the intimate side, but in the social aspects too. We're seeing them play out in our friendships. We're seeing them play out, right, in our interdependent situationships, so we might call them. And to kind of wrap my story up in a little bow, now being engaged with two children with her, and having four children with three mothers in three states, and now having community all over the world, I'm really having to ask myself more important questions like, what are the relationships I want to create, and what are the relationships I don't tolerate? And I think that's where the gold is for a lot of people who are listening. Those are the questions that would lead them to their next discovery, I feel.
Absolutely. And so now getting into a bit more of that empath and narcissist dynamic, I have found that women who are natural born healers, and generally women who are healers, or anyone who's been a healer, I should say, oftentimes comes from a family where one of the parents had some form of mental illness or addiction, or somehow that the child had to step a little bit into more of an adult role.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the child learns compassion at a young age, can see when someone's suffering, and creates this high level of empathy, and so has a higher tolerance to put up with certain types of behaviors or patterns, because they can also see the thread of like, oh, I understand they're like this because of this. And
Mm-hmm.
so a lot of women who are empaths are actually very strong-willed women, and actually have really great qualities of taking responsibility and repairing. And so because of this high level of compassion, they can end, because there's this aspect from childhood, because everything we know in relationships is rooted from childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I have seen the pattern where, because as a child there was this need to take care and fix, that perpetuates in life and perpetuates in the choice of job, which is often like a healer or a social worker or a psychologist or a therapist, or somewhere you're helping people with the problems in their life.
Right.
And then they go on to choose partners that are a form of a project in a way as well. Someone who needs healing, wants healing, and because they have this high tolerance for it, and it's been a part of their journey, the script, the story of their life, then they find themselves in these patterns with men who would be then labeled the narcissist. So from your side as the masculine, what would you say is like the underlying story of the narcissist, right? Because we always see them as like the villain, but it really comes from a place of trauma. And I think that's really important for both the narcissist to understand, but then also for any woman in relationship where she's seeing certain patterns before choosing to enter into a relationship, or if she's currently in a relationship.
Yeah. And I will say it is more common and more prominent that the man fills this more narcissistic role, and the woman is then the empathic and or enabler role, right? And that is because women are deeply rooted in compassion, they're deeply rooted in nurturing, they're deeply rooted in, right, maybe even replacing, right, the mother figure for a man. And the way that I've, right, phrased this, and this is actually what you reached out to me about initially, was that quote that I posted where I said, a narcissist is simply a wounded child who had to become the hero of their own story because someone who was supposed to be their hero wasn't showing up, right? Simply put. And I've said that normally when we start unraveling the story of narcissism, essentially all we see is that there's a child who wants to be important. They want to be valued. They want to be seen. And predominantly in society, what we've seen is men having their worth rooted in achievement, acknowledgement, and pride. And sometimes that's why most men feel most seen when somebody says, "I'm proud of you," because we didn't necessarily get that from our fathers. And we normally always got that form of acknowledgement and nurturing from our mother. So then what do? We rely on the relationships thereafter to fulfill that role, fulfill that need. And mothers being mothers, I see it all the time. They're quick to run to the child's aid, in times of terror or in times of tantrum. And when these things start happening, it's just a natural born instinct of gender, right, to fall into these patterns. And also knowing that it is the dynamic, it is the energetic force of narcissism and codependency and how they work hand in hand. Because that is also how a lot of women find importance or need or value. Oh, this person needs me. This person wants me. This person cares for me. They want my love. Oh, finally, I have some love someone wants the love I have to give. I have so much. And then the men, they're like, yes, but it's not the way I want you to love me.
And sometimes women also do it because it takes the attention off themselves. So instead of them going to do all the healing from their childhood, they're distracted by a relationship that requires them to be the healer.
Yeah.
So it's also a displacement. It's a distraction for them really looking within and facing some of the emotions or the grief or the traumas that were left unhealed from childhood. So it serves in that way to make them feel important or like it's necessary for their attention to be here. And it can oftentimes consume so much energy to be in these types of dynamics. So both partners get sucked into this vortex. And this is also where you see with any type of toxic dynamics, thriving doesn't really happen.
No.
So financially, with purpose, with mission, and both people are really led off course. And that divine union, which is a space of thriving, which is a space of giving back to the community, which is a type of relationship that is expansive. A toxic relationship or a narcissist empath relationship does the opposite. It like consumes energy. So instead of like the toroidal field that you would see of a divine union relationship, you would see this like consumption, destructive type of energy field.
Yeah.
And so it's so important to self-identify. And I also think that the other thing is, in terms of the women's role, is it's witnessing where you self-abandon to be in the relationship. So it's, you might feel like this is not the right relationship but you stay because you believe it can work out. You kind of love too much, enabling, like you said. And then with that, instead of doing what you know you should do, most of these women know this is not the right relationship. It's important to end it, do your healing work, rise to a new frequency to meet a new match, but instead self-abandonment occurs and they stay. And so what do you find is the pattern that causes the narcissist, usually the man, to stay in these types of dynamics?
Yeah, I mean, it is usually the man to start, right? And then, I've been in the situations where, I've done the work and then, there's this saying, right, to not become what you hate, right? And the underlying factor is, all my exes are the narcissist, right? But there's the least common denominator, whereas you are the magnet or you are the seeker of that. And that inherently is also narcissistic in nature as well, right? To blame and shame and project outside of oneself. So even at that point, when you look at the pattern, right, the three patterns that I've seen at least, and are the basis of human choice, right? And these are the basis of human choice. We typically first choose familiarity, then we choose pleasure, then we choose truth. And typically speaking, we have to move through the pattern of familiarity before we find the pattern of pleasure. And once we find the pattern of pleasure, then we can find the pattern of truth, because each of these patterns have different keys, different gates, different things that they unlock. And when someone sees beyond the pattern of familiarity, what they do is they see the pattern of change, right? They're able to see discerning. Discernment is the key that unlocks that. And once they go through discernment, they go into pleasure. Do I like this or do I not? Cool. Now they have the opportunity for that. And then they have preference, right? So from that cycle where it goes familiarity to pleasure, and then they have preference, then there's truth, right? Then they're saying, yes, in fact, I do know that this is true for me, that this is what I want in the moment. And that is a constant battle every single day, because we think that when we choose a new pattern, it's just going to instantly happen, right? But they say that it takes 10,000 hours of mastery for a reason. Now, take 10,000 choices and compound those time after time after time for 2 to 3 decades, to where we're now having the conversation of, oh man, how do I unravel this now, right? How do I choose something new? How do I choose something different? And really, I think it's ultimately dependent on tolerance, right? Like, how much are you willing to tolerate? And do you realize that there is a choice always? And this is something I learned through ISTA, was that, if you are aware, you are actually, in fact, the one responsible. And if you keep choosing this, then yeah, you have to take radical responsibility. And unless you're honest with yourself and you give yourself permission to move past it, then it's going to be the continuous cycle of destruction, which is kind of what you alluded to. Instead of this fractal experience of beauty, now what we're having is this compartmentalized, fractured, right, idea of relating, when that's not union, that is dependency at its finest. And there's no difference, to me at least, being someone who's used drugs and alcohol in the past, there's no difference of using someone for a fix, less than a drug, right? To feel better, to get that quick hit of pleasure, to have that thing to run to feel good when we're alone and we don't feel great or fulfilled with our own life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I absolutely believe that it's the different choices that we make. And after having a few different relationships, this is where we start to see patterns. And like you said, the familiarity piece. And so I've always found when working with clients and they're dating, and then it's like they meet someone and then something feels familiar. It's like, okay, if it feels familiar, are you going to choose that again?
Mm-hmm.
Or are you going to say, oh, wait, nope, I recognize this. And then you make a different choice of like, actually, I'm not going to choose what feels familiar. And so I've often recommended to even date people outside of your typical type and allow yourself to be surprised, because like we said, a lot of our love imprint is based on what we saw with our parents. And so that's why it's going to feel familiar, and it's going to feel like, oh, this must be love. Like, oh, they're yelling. This is love. They're yelling. My parents used to yell at each other. Oh yeah, this is right. I found the right relationship. And so I have often found women who have been in types of empath and narcissistic, or even avoidant attachment, more codependent types. The moment a guy like is really kind and loving and all the things they say they want, they're a bit like aversion to, like, they become the avoidant, right?
Yeah.
And I'm always like, well, what if you just allowed someone to love you? Like, I know it feels uncomfortable because you're used to the guy maybe not being as present, being a little avoidant, and then you're kind of wanting him to message. But now here's a guy who's really showing up and is really kind and all the different things. Can you allow a different pattern in, even if it feels unfamiliar? And so we're kind of getting a little bit into like how we can maybe date differently, like maybe the how to change the pattern. But I really do think even before that comes, every relationship, especially when it ends, is such a huge opportunity for healing and transformation. It's like, because it's so ripe, and we can feel where the wounds and the emotions and the triggers. And so that time post breakup is so important to heal. And even if you're in a relationship and then you're in a challenging, toxic relationship, it can feel like there's no way I can see myself out of this situation. Even doing the healing work while you're in one can begin the shift already, because the moment we shift our frequency, how we relate to another is different.
Yeah.
So the work is really our work. And like you said, it's radical responsibility. And it's the desire, like the North Star, may it be divine union, which means supporting your greatest evolution and your mission on the planet.
Right.
And that can be one of the greatest inspiration. And so I'm curious for you, I know you mentioned in the opening that it was the pain of the separation with your children and asking those questions that really caused you to want to change and be better for your children, for to have the love you want, I'm sure. And so what do you feel like were the things, it sounds like you going to the military helped you get out of the gangs and all of that stuff,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And beyond that, like what did your healing journey look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, getting discharged from the military after 5.5 years as a sergeant, I was rated 100% disabled. So I'm diagnosed with over 33, 34, 35 diagnoses at this point. The most recent, actually, borderline personality. It's fun, right? It's just seeing the world through extremes. I don't give a lot of power to diagnoses. I look at it as the opportunity, the offering to say, what is here for me and what is this trying to show me? And for me, those initial questions, right, of how can I show up better as a father, those questions said, okay, well, I need to be out of the military. I need to change my environment. So I went into fitness, into bodybuilding, right? Professional bodybuilder, juiced up on steroids. And that was not an aligned decision, right?
I feel like that would make you more narcissistic being
It did. It did, right? It was like a glorified form of it, right? Which actually inflated it, which then disguised it differently, right? That's really all it was. So from the military, right, and having a uniform, a costume, to bodybuilding trunks, another costume, to the fitness professional, another costume. There were just a lot of different roles and costumes that I would put on to fulfill the role that I needed to play outside in the world, right?
And that's to make you feel important, right? Like
yes,
the narcissist wants to feel important and seen. Okay.
Yeah. So it's this, I want to feel valued. I want to accomplish. I want to achieve. I want to prove everybody wrong, right, about who I once was. There were those stories forming. And that brought a different woman into my field. And it was that relationship, actually, that ended in shambles, right? That was probably...
Like, how did that shift the type of woman?
So just based on environment. So when I was in the military, both those relationships with both children, they were both in the military with me. Right. So moving into fitness, right, into the wellness world, what did I start attracting? Right. Women who were tending to their body, women who were engaged and devoted to something. As we know, the feminine is rooted in devotion. And seeing a woman devoted to something, but not a slave to a system, was completely different for me. And that was, for me, super attractive. But then there was something inside of me that said, I wanted to change that. I wanted to, I wanted something they had. I wanted to, claim or, plant my flag in the sand. Then this feeling or theory of ownership started happening. And I started realizing the control and how I wanted to shape this person to support me and my mission versus being able to see and support theirs and have it simultaneously coexisting in union, right? So I still had this idea of what relationships were, right? Mom supports dad. That's how relationships go. And I was confronted with this, and essentially it led to the demise of the relationship. And where I came home and everything was gone. And I literally had to sit with myself. I didn't eat, drink for days. I was in... That was 2019.
So she just left you, basically. There wasn't a conscious uncoupling. No, she was just I'm out.
Yep.
But was it clear there were toxic dynamics in the relationship? Yeah, but then one day she had enough and she was like, that's it.
Yep.
Sometimes I do think that's how, it's not for nothing that they say in that type of dynamic, the no contact is really important. Because what I have found on an energetic level is in toxic types of relationship, there are entity forms that are working through the people. This is from an energy perspective. That are feeding off the conflict and off the emotions that are not love and gratitude, but rather the rage or the anger, the frustration or the jealousies, the shame, the guilt, the lower vibrational frequencies. And so to kind of starve these energies, sometimes that's the way that has to go. However, of course, both people participating to uncord and unhook each other is more powerful, but usually
Mhm.
people are not in the right state of mind to do that. Like there's
Yeah.
not enough self-awareness or even energetic awareness about energy hygiene and such. So
Yeah.
sometimes it can be the most painful, but the biggest gift to have
Yeah.
that
And
language.
that gift was me saying, oh, wait, I am the least common denominator. This is how everything ends, right? I push people to the point of giving up to where I am actually forecasting my own greatest fear, which is to be left, right? To be abandoned, to be neglected, to not be important, to not be loved, right? All of these things were surfaced in those 2 or 3 days. And that's when I really, truly desired to do that work. And I was almost on the verge of actually killing myself when I got a call from a client and she invited me to Landmark. So from that right moment in May of 2019 to now, actually, that was 2017. I got the call for that. And then I met her afterwards. So I got those backwards. But after her, I went to another program. It was actually MITT. And that's the program that Lewis Howes went through. So when I went through that program, then I started looking at the least common denominator. I had the language of stories and all those things coming into that relationship, which I leverage, right? Because that's what we do too. We leverage knowledge for power and we use words to twist realities really well. And that's what makes me great at sales, to be honest. So, but not in a manipulative way, which is why I've gone towards integrity-based sales, but I'm getting off track. So from that point, right, the least common denominator, I really had to look at all the things that I've done. And one exercise that really opened that up in that program, which we're not supposed to talk about, but at the same time, and it's not a contract, is, I was dressed in a ballerina costume. They gave us roses, and we had to deliver roses to every woman in the room, resembling all the women that we've manipulated, all the women that we've abused, all the women that we've used for our own benefit. And that hit me different because I've never.
Like it made you have to acknowledge it.
Yes, on a deep level, and all I could see were all of my exes' faces. So like I broke in that moment. And then after that, shortly after that time, I found my way to Sacred Sons. And that's when I started going into their trainings and developments, and I started facilitating, which I'm no longer part of the organization. But then I started realizing that I've been outsourcing a lot of my own work to women instead of being in the room with other men who can hold me accountable, who can also call me out on my shit.
Because now you're
And
speaking to something really important, which is for narcissists, the woman is the supply. And so a man who's like a lone wolf and has a lot of feminine energies around him and feminine attachments and all feminine beings that can give him praise and hopping from one relationship to the other, there's no accountability. And then you just keep saying, oh, my ex was crazy. It was my ex. My ex was crazy. But then you keep seeing these patterns of promiscuity, of just getting this attention. And I do believe that it's men's work and men's circles and being in front of other men to hold a man accountable is what breaks the narcissist cycle 100%, because they will call you out on your bullshit, basically. Whereas with the feminine, because of our divine mother energy and our understanding and our compassion, we're going to listen to the stories. Whereas men will be like, bro, listen up. Like, no.
which I will say, I had that with some of my peers, right? Some people who were directly mentoring me, facilitating with me on the leadership team. But what I will say is, as a cautionary tale to a lot of people who are hearing this, is don't always believe what you see on Instagram about certain groups and organizations and men's circles and councils. There are a lot of people who are trying, but there are people in the field who I believe are doing it right. And, there are people like Traver Bohm. There's people like, my brother Andrew, right? Andrew Huvar in Rising Brotherhood here. There are men who are facilitating these spaces with a high level of integrity, and it's not feeding or perpetuating the brotherhood, right? Which is a whole different conversation. But just as a cautionary tale, right? I think the common thread here is men need a strong group of men around them, right? Whether it's within an organization or within your local community, or hell, look at your neighbors from left to right and go knock on doors and say, hey, Rose, like, you want to get by a fire and like be real with one another? It's really not that hard. It's really not that hard, but men need it.
Yeah, and women need it too, actually, which is why women's circles are so important, and having a friendship with women. And sometimes when these type of narcissist, empath, or toxic, or like codependent type of relationships happen, both people just like forget the outside world and isolate. And so, and that's when you get caught in the trap of illusion. Whereas if you continue in your friendships, in doing things that fulfill you both, you can see it's like the illusion doesn't set in, like the denial and all the things of the distorted patterning. I feel like it's less likely to take its hold and grip. And basically, if you ask any narcissist empath relationship, both people end up being so isolated with each other.
Right.
And that's kind of where these emotionally abusive patterns can happen, because you don't really have the reminder of like, oh, right, that's actually not how we're supposed to behave as humans, especially in a romantic loving relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like accountability when we have these communities around us and we're doing our personal development work in the mirror of community, because we can be smart and get around ourselves and be like, oh no, I'm good. All is good.
Yeah. It's funny because I was literally thinking about this morning about the mother of my oldest son, who happens to be an ER nurse. And I remember the day she said, well, I don't have any trauma. And I was, oh man, we are in different fields now. And, you know, I just chuckle a little bit, because I think there is a moment of ease that we can all have, right? I feel like a lot of these conversations, and this is just something I'm sensing, might create a lot of unconscious pressure, right, to resolve or reclaim or redeem. And I feel like that these types of, you know, we'll call them toxic environments, I think that they are so beautiful in a way, right? Because it really is exposing everything you need in the moment, if you so choose to look at it. And I think the common threads that we pulled from this conversation have been a high level of integrity to determine where you are in the pattern of familiarity to pleasure to truth to accountability, and not self-isolating or self-deprecating within the relationship of the toxic environment. And then, right, sourcing everything that you need within something that literally has no source to give. That is just feeding and replacing off one another. It's like seeing two vampires just sucking each other's blood, and it's just going back and forth and back and forth, and there's no life force actually within the dynamic. Right? It's just this self-deprecating effect, and I'm just getting a visual, which is why I'm laughing. And you know, that third piece is what you just mentioned, is this, you know, level of awareness that we can actually choose ourselves, right? And to know that there is something beautiful there for you if you so choose to fight for it, because fighting with someone is not the same as fighting for someone. I have to explain this to my fiance quite often. And I love that conversation, because I remind her, I'm not fighting with you, right? I'm fighting for you. And my tonality is not directed towards you. It is to emphasize the importance of what we are here to offer to one another. And that type of leadership is necessary at certain moments, because yes, women, they feel things, lots of things. And normally what they're saying is what they're feeling, not what they need, is what I'm realizing more and more. and these dynamics are beautiful in a way, you know, because if somebody does not choose to see it or work through it, right, they will more than likely, in fact, choose it again, because there is the you know, I just listened to this on that podcast with Charles Einstein, right? If you want to work on something courageous, you have to face something fearful. If you want to work on a relational pattern, then you have to choose a partner who's willing to work on those patterns with you. And you mentioned that time alone after a breakup. I think that's an amazing time to nurture the self, right? To come back home to self, to then, right, find a grounded perspective, to then make that choice, which is the most important. But I think it's interesting that so many people, right, separate from relationship and then automatically assume that, oh, well, I've done all this work with myself, so I'm definitely not going to find it out there. And I'm like, we'll see.
Yeah. And I've been saying in this season of the podcast how much that relationships are a technology. And I know that my most challenging relationships, like they were master teachers, and that I couldn't even go to certain places that needed healing without their mirror. Like I needed them to give me the key to unlock it within myself.
Right.
So I think both are important for our greatest becoming. Like we're not here to be the monks that meditate and are single for years on end, because there's certain things that we unlock only within the container of relationship, that only romantic relationship will help us uncover. And it's that balance. And I do think similarly, when we choose to go into relationship, there's like this other level of healing that happens together, kind of like what you're saying. Like, I'm not fighting with you, I'm fighting for you. It's like, and also with healing, there's this thing where we're healing together. Like, this is important to heal together, not to avoid or run away, but it's like, can we go in and do the work required together? And I'm always a big fan that if we're in relationships, to really try our best to work that one out. And then it's only when you've exhausted so many things, and only when the pattern keeps showing up and the other person isn't really participating and doing the actual work, and you've given it however many chances you need, then it's like, okay, fine, I bow out. Thank you. You've given me these gems. And then I go, I sit with myself, I heal, evolve, raise my frequency, and then resonate in the next person to go on the healing journey with.
Right. Yeah. And that's the biggest piece there too. It's like, we have this attachment to, like, when we first get into a relationship, we're already measuring or already assessing, right? Is this person my future wife? Is this person my future husband? Can this person have my kids? Can I have their kids? And it's like, we walk in with this we walk in with this doubt from the start, right? Which is also the pattern of familiarity. And I think that pattern is something that we often overlook. It's not, can I, or would I, or could they? It's, am I willing to see if it's possible, right? Am I willing to see what's here, even if it has no attachment to the outcome that I desire? Can I be in relationship with this person if it means that I'm not going to marry them? Can I be in relationship with this person if, right, if I know that, if I can just accept that this might just be a stepping stone, can I be okay with that?
Yeah.
Right. But we have these ideas that, oh, it must mean the thing, right? Because thanks, Disney, we've been given or fed a lot of these, right, unconscious programs that extend far beyond mom and dad. Like, yes, rooted in mom and dad, but then we have the compounded nature of attachment relationships. Then we have the compounded nature of digital relationships, or fantasies that we've been fed, or books that were, written and scribed to, right, program our minds in the school system to think a certain way or be a certain way to follow the career path that they wanted us to. And conspiracy theory stuff. But then again, right, it's the offering is, am I okay with the outcome no matter what? Am I okay with myself at the end of the day, with or without this person? And that is as simple as it can get, right?
Yeah.
I think that's really what the beauty of all relationships offers is, even if this person was gone, can I still be okay? And can I still commit to the path of love, even when my heart is hurting?
Yeah. And I feel like you're touching upon wholeness, which is being okay with the relationship for whatever it's here to serve, whether it's the season, the month, the lesson, the 3 years, however long it's meant to be in our lives, and ultimately trusting that whatever we're seeking from a relationship, that we can ultimately give it to ourselves. Of course, aside from, if we want to have children, you can't give yourself a child. And there, well, I guess you could go into a sperm bank and then just have your own child.
Yeah.
Yeah, we could kind of surrogate and there's
We're not here
ways.
for technicalities. We're just...
Yeah. And I also see, though, as someone who's a keeper and a carrier of codes for divine union, that there is something more expansive about that specific type of relationship that you unlock, because you're like two unique beings, like a different species that comes together to co-create. and then what can be awakened through Tantra practice and all of that. But in order for any of that to be unlocked, we need to be in relationships of trust, truth, love, respect. There needs to be a really beautiful connection. It's not just something that poof, like, oh yeah, I'm going to create that with you. There is a very specific type of frequency that needs to be there. And both people need to have done a high level of work on themselves first to be in a place to even receive that level of love and connection and give it too, right? It's that infinity.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and to even add on to that, right? You see online, and I've seen some comments on, whether it's Jake Woodward stuff or my brother Steph's stuff, and you see a lot of people in these comment sections, right? Oh, well, I wish this man would appear. I wish, I'm ready for that type of woman. And it's like, are you though? Because
are you even the person who would attract in that kind of person?
Yes. Are you the person who would attract it? If yes, are you really willing to face that? Are you capable of facing that? Are you well equipped to face it? Because, there's a lot of people out there saying, oh, where's this person who's doing the work, who can do it with me? And then they get into it and they're like, oh my gosh, this is not what I expected. Because that's not the way God works, right? Like God, universe, or spirit, whatever relationship you have to it, it's the very thing you are seeking is the very thing you're not going to get. It's the very thing you're not seeking that you are unaware of, that you will be presented, that you will actually have to overcome in order to get to the thing that you actually want, right? So it's like, I think the recognition of that too. Okay, you've moved beyond narcissism. You've moved beyond, right, severe empathic dependency.
Abandoning.
And right, yeah. And now you're on this journey of self-empowerment, right? Borderline self-righteousness in certain cases. And are you willing to face that? No, not all of your needs are important, and maybe it's time to also put this person's need, but find the balance of the two worlds together, right? Like it's this constant pendulum swing effect. And to think that we're going to find the dream relationship after we've resolved this pattern is going to appear, I think, is also an illusion. These are years and years and years and years of patterns and programs. And you can do that with only one person if you so choose, and if you choose together. That's the beauty.
Yeah.
Right.
And that it is a forever journey. Like just because you find the person and you're in divine union, it doesn't mean that you're not going to still be working on communication and speaking to each other and showing up to each other in your highest and being devoted to love every day, not the selfish needs, but what would create highest love in this relationship. So it's a forever journey that never ends.
Yeah.
Yeah, so beautiful. So where can people find you to connect with you? Of course, we're going to share all of your info in the comments section as well as any links, but you can share whatever you'd like to share to close out the episode.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much for having me on, first and foremost. Very grateful. And I hope that people got some value from this. So yeah, people can pretty much just Google my name, Nathan Kohlerman, and almost everything will pop up. I have my book, Between Two Worlds. You can search me on Amazon. You can go to Google. You can go to Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all the things, and find me there.
Beautiful. And so thank you everyone for joining us today. You can receive more from us inside the bonus content, and we will see you on Instagram. And thank you so much for being here. Bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Dr. Nikki Starr Show. Please like this podcast and share it with anyone you feel would benefit. Subscribe to the podcast to receive bonus content, and remember, every Monday the video version goes live on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for being on the Ascension path with me and for doing this great work.